Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Austin Private Wealth, a registered investment advisor focused on fee-only financial planning and investment management. Their mission is to serve affluent clients with personalized financial advice, fostering a trusted relationship that will endure for generations to come. Austin Private Wealth is not just about managing wealth. They're about inspiring you to embrace a future filled with possibilities and helping you architect enduring legacies. Their core values of integrity, service, caring, excellence, and growth are at the heart of everything they do. Connect with them today at austinprivatewealth.com.
Austin Private Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Austin Private Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Austin Private Wealth unless a client service agreement is in place. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
A key enabler of Austin's growth are the unique institutions, events, and infrastructure that only exists in our region. In 2018, the Army Futures Command chose Austin as its new base of operations. We wanted to learn why and how that is empowering our future here in Central Texas. Today, we speak with Brance Hudzietz of the Army Applications Laboratory, a division of the Army Futures Command. Brance is a tech geek and a connector. While previous roles saw Brance in labs building UAVs, simulating black hole phenomena, and using particle accelerators, he spent the last 7 years building innovation programs and communities of deep tech entrepreneurs. He currently sources commercial technologies that solve the DoD's toughest modernization challenges. His active areas of interest include artificial intelligence, autonomous robots, cybersecurity, and the intersection of technology and art. And that's a great place to start a discussion.
Brance, welcome to the Austin Next podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to join you guys.
All right, I want to start off with the broader picture. What is the mission and vision of Army Futures Command, and how does Army Applications Lab fit into that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'll start with maybe size first, and that's going to back us into how we play. So Army Futures Command is a fairly big deal. So the Army had been organized into 3 branches. And in 2018, they created a 4th branch. So a massive reorganization, the largest reorganization of the Army since the Vietnam era. And broadly speaking, Army Futures Command is working to modernize the Army. All of the technology needs that the Army has, AFC is modernizing that. So they look at everything from super early stage R&D that's happening in labs like the Army Research Lab, all the way through fielding and testing new products and new solutions. So it's a huge swath of stuff to tackle, especially if you think about all the tech needs that the Army has. So AEL, we're a very small organization. We've got about 30, 35 people, but we have a really niche mission. And I think it's really important in the grand scheme of things, but it's a very niche thing. Army Applications looks at how can the Army leverage innovation from the commercial sector in order to solve Army problems better, faster, more efficiently. And if you think about the Army, it kind of gets this bad rep of reinventing the wheel all the time. We need a water bottle, but it has to be painted blue and have this logo on it. So it's going to cost us $1,000 per water bottle. That's what we don't want to do, right? We want to cut down on that process. And it's even less a factor of money, although that is important, but it's really just a factor of speed, right? If it takes us 5 years to figure out how to counteract drone technology, that's 5 years where we're behind, right? So we have to be able to iterate much more quickly and efficiently. And so by leveraging tech from the commercial sector, we think that that's our way in. We think that that's the way that we can move at a faster pace. Does that help?
So it does. So operationally, then, how do you go about actually accomplishing that goal?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when AEL was stood up, we had this really great idea that we were going to be the eyes and ears of the Army and keep an eye on the tech ecosystem, hear really great ideas and really great companies, and like turn around to the Army and say, hey, this is cool tech, this is a cool company, like this is how we should use it. Turns out that is really hard to do. Like the Army is just not set up on the back end to like react that quickly. And a lot of it has to do with purchasing things, right? There's a funny story of like, there's this company that came to us early on, and they've got this game-changing radio technology. And so we like get excited. We turn to the general in the Army who's like responsible for radios. And he says, this is great. I literally just signed the order to purchase like 100,000 radios yesterday. Like I can't do anything with this. I can't spend another like dime on this because I just wrote this huge check to buy radios, right? So about a year and a half ago, we decided that we really had to like flip this business model on like 180 degrees. And we really had to start with the Army problem first and make sure that was the right problem at the right time with the right budgets and everything lined up before we go engage industry. So operationally, what that looks like is we have folks on our teams that will go embed themselves with an Army unit and understand what problems they have. And we're doing kind of two things at the same time, right? We're understanding the problem and trying to get at the root problem, not just like I need a water bottle, I need to paint it blue, but like I need soldiers to be better hydrated, right? So really understanding the problem space. And at the same time, folks like myself on the AL team are looking at what's happening in industry and saying, is there any activity in this space? Are there any commercial analogs to this problem, right? So like the water bottle example, like what can we learn from the pro sports industry or like the college sports industry? Are there like new technologies, new companies that are popping up? And we're also trying to get a feel for like how active is this ecosystem, right? Is there like one company that makes water bottles for all of college and NFL sports, or is there this big ecosystem around like wellness, right? So we're trying to figure out the size of the market that can solve this. And then all this stuff happens on the back end once we've decided it's a good problem and that there's like this commercial market that can tackle it. And if we do our jobs well at AEL, like you as a solver or you as a company never see this stuff, but it's really important. So I'll pat ourselves on the back here. What we try to do is we try to line up like, one, we want to have the end user, like the person who's going to be using the water bottle, and have them set aside time to like do R&D jointly with us. We want to make sure that obviously there's money to like do this R&D project, but also there's follow-on money so that we don't just create this cool science fair project that sits on a shelf and nobody's ready to buy it. And then lastly, we're really getting these like high-level handshakes that are agreements where if AAL and this company mature this technology and it's successful, then there's somebody on the other end waiting to buy it and like budgeting for it like 2 to 3 years out, right? And all of that stuff those are the cogs of the Army purchasing system that just drags everything down that people don't like. But that's what we're trying to line up. So we joke that like all of the government hoops that you have to jump through, we're trying to line them up all together so that you just have to jump once and you've got it all figured out.
In a sense, this sounds a lot like the SBIR programs, the Small Business Innovation Research programs, the set-asides that the DoD and all the other federal agencies have. And a lot of that's been used to fund small businesses. And I remember in working with companies that were using SBIR type grants, there was always a shopping list. Here was the problem of said agency, DoD, whatever. And it sounds like you're taking that one step further and actually going in and searching for these problems and then searching for solutions. How would you compare the two programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So AEL uses SBIR funds quite extensively. And I'll chalk that up to two things. One, it's a really good source of money for us, right? It fits our needs really well. But two, we're still a new organization from a government perspective. And so I liken us to a really well-funded startup. We're scrappy. We're trying to get our hands on every dollar we can in order to do more work and do more projects, right? And so we have wound up leveraging SBIR quite extensively. I would say that the SBIR program is kind of gives you this foundation of model of how to work. But AEL has taken our business model and laid it on top of SBIR funds, and we package it in a program called Spartan SBIR. But really what it is we want to package that access to end users, the access to decision makers, the transparency of the problems, and we want to deploy capital much faster than typical SBIR programs. So we add on all of the bells and whistles that we're well positioned to provide. to make cyber a little bit more effective, a little bit more user friendly. I mean, like here's a good example. Historically, cyber is released in like 3 batches throughout the year, right? And so if you are a run-of-the-mill startup that hasn't worked with the government very much or has never worked with the government, like how are you supposed to know that you have to watch like these 3 dates, circle them on your calendar, and like spend the whole day digging through the sam.gov website? Like that is, you're never going to know that stuff, right? So we just do like common sense, right? We release the problems, the solicitations as we have these problems. We post them on Twitter and LinkedIn and social media. Like we do email blasts, like just kind of table stakes for startups these days. Like we're trying to bring that to the cyber process. And again, don't take this me knocking the cyber process. It's really effective. But how AL has built out, we add a little bit more, a few more bells and whistles onto it.
It seems, right, even talking about, SPR and your long, talk about the procurement process, that its process and models is almost as important as the innovation itself. And we've heard a lot about 12-year procurement cycles and cost plus, budgeting. That may be one of the things that's obviously driving the disconnect between, the faster private sector innovation versus the, much more slower innovation that's going on in kind of the DoD sector. So it's great to hear that, you've already talking about more on the process and model innovation as much as kind of the product and technology innovation. One of the other pillars, though, as you see this, is almost the cultural innovation. And I think the relationship between tech and DoD. Because if you look back, I'll just say kind of the Cold War era, right? There was a lot of want and collaboration between the private sector and the military. In the last, 20 years, I don't know what the right dates to kind of put on it, you've seen the opposite. You've seen actually we don't want to work with the DoD. This is not kind of what we're looking at. You saw things that, with Amazon and Google in terms of some of the projects that they were working on with the intelligence sector as well. Do you see that continued pushback? But I also want to say the opposite. You're starting to have I've seen a new class of companies like the Andurils of the world that are starting with it's important to us to work with the defense sector. And if you hear Palmer Luckey talk, he talks a lot about kind of the same kind of process innovation that we're talking about. So in the work that you guys have been doing, what's kind of the cultural innovation that's going on? Where are you seeing that shift occurring?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple things to talk about there. So first, you mentioned that like the business model and exporting our business model, like that's absolutely a mission for AAL. I think it's a little boastful to say that like 2.5, 3 years in, like we've got it down and we're going to like write the book for the Army. But we are bringing a lot of table stakes, commercial best practices that are commonly known. And we're trying to just communicate that to the rest of the Army, like writ large, of like, hey, I know you've been doing this process for 20 years or 40 years, but like, here's the playbook for how to like hop, skip, and jump 20 years to what industry is doing right now, right? Like we're not gonna be like the bleeding edge of business models, but like at least we're doing what like 90% of other people are doing in the commercial sector. So like absolutely exporting business models is a mission for us. And you can see that like we're still learning and figuring this out just with our idea of like, hey, it'd be great if we could be this reactionary innovation force, and like we're just not there yet, right? So what can we do now, and like how can we share those best practices? So absolutely doing that. When you mention like this cultural piece and maybe the stigma of working with the government, I actually think that this is a misnomer. I don't have like hard data to back this up, but anecdotally, I think this is a slight misnomer that's maybe exaggerated via news channels a little bit. Like generally, I think the actual problem is that most companies have no idea how to work with the government or the DoD. And so it's just like, there's no appetite there, right? So you have like broadly a like small appetite, and then a few of these like folks who like don't want to work with the DoD. And it kind of just like makes it seem like everybody doesn't. But in general, I find that especially by leveraging SBIR funds, which are non-dilutive funding, we provide this really amazing opportunity to de-risk the technology roadmap for a company. And so if companies understand how to leverage this, like even just like a tiny little bit, it all of a sudden becomes this really great opportunity. And for AAL, like we're not really working on offensive weapons, right? Like we are working on tools and technologies that support the soldier, but we're not building bombs. We're not building like new bullets. And not to say we never will do that, but like generally our projects really are like, how do we make soldiers more effective at their jobs? So the jump between what we're asking companies to do and what they're already doing in the commercial sector generally isn't that big. Like I'll give you an example here. The Army has cannons, right? And they shoot these big like artillery rounds that are like, they look like massive bullets and they weigh 100 pounds. And up until like today, basically, the way that we would reload these is you don't want to store all your ammunition next to the cannon in case it blows up, right? So you like have this like supply depot, you like drive this, this Jeep with like pallets of these 100-pound shells. And you have soldiers like bucket brigade these things back into the racks, right? I get it. Like that's like a fail-proof way. Human labor is fail-proof generally, but like not super efficient, tire soldiers out, causes so much like back problem, knee problems, right? Like, and we need to be able to do this faster, right? So we started working with companies that are building like heavy duty robotic arms that can lift 100-pound shells and reload them quickly and efficiently. And what we find is that like there are a lot of companies and needs from the industrial sector that need to do the same exact thing, right? Like robotic automation is a huge, like there's a huge market. And so by asking companies like, hey, can you make this so it can grab like round things instead of square things? Like, yeah, sure. Like, can you make this so it's like, a little more fault tolerant, or it uses less power? Cool. Yeah. Like industry wants that too. So we're basically just de-risking the tech roadmap that these companies want to do anyway. So there's definitely a alignment there. So, okay, I'll like pause there for a second and talk about folks like Anduril, because I think it's this really cool phenomenon. So you've got several of these like defense unicorns that are popping up, and like there's jokes sort of about like how do you create a defense unicorn? Like you start with $1 billion and you start a defense company. Like that's sort of the case a little bit, but I think what you're finding here is that you've got these serial entrepreneurs who understand product market fit and market opportunity insanely well, right? Like they understand those fundamentals insanely well, so that they're able to look at the defense market, generally this market that like Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are just like ignoring. And they say, hey, actually there's this huge gap where we have expertise and we can make a big splash. And I think you're starting to see that like cultural change like proliferate out. I think it's sort of trickling down through like certain VCs who are more open to this, and not everybody's on board, but I think you're starting to see that cultural shift change. And I think it's for the better, right? Like the traditional defense primes do a ton of work for us, but we can't expect 5 companies to do everything that we need. And those companies just look at us as the Army and say, what do you need, right? And here are these other companies like Anduril saying, hey, you're missing out on all this cool tech that the commercial sector is doing. You guys are light years behind, and like, here's a product for you. So I think that's a good thing in general that we're creating some of these, new faces in an old industry.
Let's take a look down a level and look at how AAL and Army Futures Command has come into Austin. Why Austin?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it dovetails nicely with the last comments about defense primes, historical defense primes, and what they were doing wasn't meeting the need, right? Like we were getting outpaced by our peer adversaries, and the speed of innovation in the commercial sector is exponentially increasing compared to what the Army is doing or what the DoD broadly is doing, right? So I think there's this need to get out of the DC area and say we can't put this other command in the DC area because we have to like break the mold of like traditional bonds there, right? And then I think that a natural place to think about would be Silicon Valley, right? It's like the hub of tech innovation, but there's some of that like PR cultural change that wasn't really ready or the right scene, I don't think. So then I think you're left with this like swath of middle America. It's like broadly like not the coast is what I'm talking about right there. And there's a lot of good candidates. I think the Raleigh-Durham area was a contender for a while. And even within Texas, like there's a lot of good cities here that I think could be candidates. I think what made it special was that from Austin, you've got Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Like the Austin market itself is phenomenal, but you're surrounded by this like triumvirate of like powerhouse cities and unbelievable amounts of like corporate innovation, startup innovation, venture capital. Like there's so much that's happening just in Texas. And then from Austin, you can reach either coast. People can travel here easily. Like, and then all that is basically like ignoring Austin itself as a city, right? Just like all of the surrounding things about Austin that make it great. And then you look at the Austin ecosystem and like, it is blowing up, right? It's been blowing up for the last 5 years and it doesn't look like that's going to slow down, significantly in any time soon, right? You've got all these companies that are relocating to Austin for cost of living, like talent. Like there's so many of the right ingredients about Austin. And then you start layering on like things like South by Southwest coming up. And that is just creates these nexus points in Austin throughout the year that bring people in, bring talent in, and you really get this mix of ideas and culture that the Army needed, right? And so I think that it's the talent, it's the startups, like the solvers, and then culturally, I think it's the right place for Austin. Like we're not afraid of the DoD. Like we like the military in Texas. We've got innovators, and honestly, like Texans are hungry, right? Like Texans want to work. They want to solve big problems and hard problems, and there's so much alignment with like industrial needs and enterprise needs of what we're doing. So I think it's a match made in heaven. So, anyways, that's rambling a little bit. Some Texas pride coming out there. Hopefully that plays.
No, actually, that's a great definition of what makes Austin unique and is perfect for what we're talking about today. And clearly, you mentioned more and more companies moving to Austin. So of these companies coming here, whether it's headquarters, whether it's subsidiaries, whether it's new plants, what are the types of companies that AAL is looking for?
Great question. So we have three technology verticals. They're very broad, so I'll kind of tease them out for you guys. But broadly speaking, the three priorities for us over the next 2 years or so are energy and electrification. That's everything from like grid level energy. How do we power bases more efficiently, effectively? How do we transfer that energy in the most efficient and effective way possible? And how do we build resilience around grids? And that's a timely conversation for Austin, for Texas. When we scale it down a little bit more to the electric vehicle side, how is the Army going to electrify fleets of vehicles? And what are the specific challenges around electrifying vehicles in remote locations with maybe not the best infrastructure or no infrastructure? How do you look at these electric vehicles like connecting with the grid and connecting with end users as a kind of this like drivable giant battery? And then like scaling it down even more to the soldier and like the individual, how do we generate power out in the field more efficiently? How do we get off of like gas and diesel generators? There's so much here that I like blows my mind, but like, what's the software and the algorithmic innovation that's happening to like optimize energy storage and energy transfer? All of that like makes your iPhone battery last for 2 days instead of like 2 hours. But most people don't think about that at all. So that's the type of stuff that we're looking for in energy. The next broad category is applied AI and applied robotics. An example of this would be the company I talked about making the robotic arms to lift the cannons, the artillery rounds. Really, what we're looking for here is technology that reduces like man hours. We look at safety a little bit, but like really we look at how can we create technologies that are force multipliers for soldiers. So instead of taking 10 soldiers to unload a truck, can we create forklifts that one guy can press a button on an iPad and have this forklift unload this truck? So look at those force multiplier technologies. And then the last category for us is human performance. And this is a really interesting one that I think there's a lot of alignment with the commercial sector, but we're still figuring out our footing here. But when we think about human performance, it's not just like, can I run faster, jump higher? It's, can I sleep better? Can I wake up feeling rested and like a clear head? Can I maintain like a healthy emotional and mental status, right? Like all of these are problems that surround the Army, surround the DoD, and they're all kind of interconnected with this human performance aspect. Yeah, we want people to be able to run fast. Like we got that, but like we can put them on treadmills. We got that part sort of figured out. But kind of this holistic health piece is really important to us. And you look at interesting companies like Apple Watch and Fitbit, right? But the Oura Ring and Whoop and all these companies that are starting to say like, hey, we can't just look at like how fast you ran a mile. We need to look at you as the person holistically, and make sure that you are functioning at an optimal level. So those are the three pillars that we're working on. And then like any organization with somebody higher up, there's always the kind of like stray voltage thing that's like, this is a really great project we should work on. So I'll leave maybe like 20% of my time for just those like cool ideas that happen, that for sure are gonna come across our radar.
So I want to touch on the human performance for a second, because I think there's an interesting thing, and my background is in life science and innovation in that space. What I find interesting is like I want to combine the human performance with your talk about the tech de-risking and almost the multiplier. Which one of the problems that I tend to see that we have in, I'll call broadly the health and wellness space, is there's a lot of gray, right? You have the very clinical FDA type of path. You have the things that are being sold for the moon, but are obviously snake oil. Then you've got that kind of gray area in between. It's an interesting bet by companies that might want to, work with someone like an AAL to be able to say, because look, this can't be snake oil if we're selling it, if we're trying to work on the performance of our soldiers. Like this has to actually work. This has to be, something that not only work, but has I'll call it, a clinical significant level of improvement, right? Like, hey, if I sleep better by 1 minute and I can statistically prove that, wonderful. Who cares, right? It's not actually a broad, strong enough difference, right? So I think that is a really interesting kind of multiplier effect that you guys would be able to do to really kind of let people put their things through the rigor and say, we're going to make our soldiers better. And clearly, if I can make, in the worst case scenario, soldiers sleep better, you in your bed and regular thing probably will also have that level of that positive, just taking sleep as the example. But at the same time, as you said, whether it's run faster, and then this obviously goes to the entire gamut, as you said, everything from physical performance to mental performance to mental well-being, a lot of different things from that I think will really have the ability to kind of maybe start in the kind of what we did in the old days, like let's say the shuttle program, where things started and were innovated in the military, and then the commercial applications kind of came second. So that actually is something that really kind of gets me excited and interested here.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and like looking at the progress of some of these technologies in the health and wellness space, like a lot of them take a clinical first route, right? Like if you think about like new sensors for like blood glucose levels, right? Like that has a clinical need for diabetics, right? But if we think about how like a B2C company and like the mass audience could gain value out of continually monitoring their blood glucose levels, like there's so much opportunity there. But like that's not your beachhead market, right? You have to start with the diabetics first. And like, okay, so can we develop new sensors and new algorithms to analyze this data that we prove out in these clinical areas, or like pseudo clinical areas, and then eventually will be adopted into the in the mass market. So I think that the DoD use case here is an example of that, right? Like we will pilot new sensors, right? Like if you've got a new crazy cool new sensor that is going to like let us understand the human body better, like we will pilot that. And you've got a baked in like user group who's going to be active and moving every day, right? Like we really care about this.
Well, I was going to say, so I actually used to work in the continuous glucose monitor space, so I know it quite well. But it's an interesting thing that you say, because I want to bring back the business model, right? Because one of the biggest things that I think is stopping, obviously, mass adoption. Now you're seeing, CGM technology be used by kind of the optimizers, the longevity crowd, and the like. But you also see it was, to your point, it was started off as a type 1 use case, and it's only recently been moving into type 2. But what's interesting is one of the biggest issues why it hasn't gotten mass has been cost, right? The sensors are still very expensive. They last for a number of days, and they have to have that kind of technology in. What my question is, getting back to our process and procurement, is, as we kind of said, generally speaking, the DoD is overpaid for things, their water bottle example and the like. So in this particular case, if driving down the cost element is really the key feature, how can the DoD be the one to, push that type of innovation, since historically that's not been the area in which they've innovated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't think that the Army is doing this super well. And like, if you think about like, do we have the capacity to write a solicitation that specifically looks for like low cost glucose sensors? Absolutely. Like, we can do that and prove out new technologies that will bring this cost down. But really what we're innovating there is like the fundamental underlying technology. And like, if the CGM aren't like principles are going to cost you $100, and it's just like, that's what it's going to cost, like, then there's only so much we can do there. So, if instead we say like, okay, we're going to fund something that looks at like, a light-based sensor that can do CGM, like, okay, that's something that where we'd play. But really, I think what you're getting at is like, does the Army facilitate price reduction when producing at scale? And I don't think that we do that very effectively, right? Like, we kind of support startups and say like, hey, like, here's some options if you need to find a manufacturing partner. Like, we loosely do that, but like, we actually haven't built the skill set or the tools yet to do that effectively. And so I think there's this huge opportunity there for large players in the innovation space to support this, right? So like, if you are a large manufacturing company that like crushes the ability to take a prototype and reduce the cost by 20x and mass produce it like millions of units, like, the companies that we're working with, the startups that we're working with, need that help, right? Like, if we want to create CGM for every soldier, but we need to get that price down to like $10 a patch instead of 100, like, that startup probably won't be able to do that. So in a dream world, AAL and AFC would like have this Rolodex of like VCs and transition partners on the industry side that we could like kick these companies to, and they'd have this like accelerator support network that would help them scale and produce millions of products for the Army. Like, we're not there yet. Maybe someday we'll like have the legal infrastructure to do that and the know-how how to do that. But as of right now, we're not. So, we really kind of trust the network right now to find each other and say like, hey, if you need help, go partner with the primes, go partner with one of the large defense contractors who knows how to do this, or go find someone, who mass produces CPG products and like, so anyway, we can get better there, but absolutely in need. And I think to keep up with innovation globally, we'll need to figure out how to streamline that process.
Well, clearly scaling up is one of the biggest issues for any small company, any innovation company. And you've outlined 3 areas that cover everything from physics to mathematics and AI to human factors. So that's a broad scope. Great. All necessary. But when you're talking to companies, whether they're already here in Austin or they're looking at moving to Austin, scale is one thing. What are the other big issues that these people face when they're deciding on working with you here or coming here to work with you?
That's a great question. So I would kind of answer that in like two categories, right? First, like working with AAL and then moving to Austin. And I'll call it here that companies can work with AAL. They don't have to move to Austin to work with us. We work with many companies globally or across the country. But thinking about, should a company work with AAL? So the first thing that I want to know is, does the Army's need align with your existing technology development roadmap? And if it does, great. Like, we are like a match made in heaven there. We're probably match made in heaven there. But if it doesn't, I don't want to say that we're not going to work with you or you shouldn't work with us. But I really would advise companies to look at like, are you just applying for this because you're running out of runway and you're grasping for straws? And like that can work. Like, there are companies that like continually get SBIR grants and like, become this cyber mill and they're just chasing the next one. Like, there are successful companies that do that, but there's a lot of companies that really is the death blow, right? Because they take their eye off the commercial ball that they're focusing on, because they're grasping at this like free government money over here. And it really isn't, right? It detracts from the mission that they're trying to do as a startup. I really want to advise companies to like, okay, make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons and that you're equipped to do this. so that'd be kind of the advice on working with AAL. Moving to Austin, I would look at what are your needs from a company perspective? What are your current challenges with your company? And does Austin provide the value to make that a good decision? So like an example here, if you're trying to lower overhead and you are currently in the California area, you can move to Austin and probably save like 40% right off the bat on like rent and staff costs like that, you know? If you're looking for talent and you're having a hard time finding like solid talent and that talent isn't sticking around for a long time, Austin's probably a really good move. If you're a company that needs like literally like the best of the best of the best, like architect, and that person only works in Silicon Valley, like, okay, maybe you should still move to Austin and just hire that person remotely. But like, you know, like there are certain people that live in the Bay Area, right? And if you need that exact person, like take that into consideration. I would say 99% of companies can hire remotely, especially over the last 2 years, we found that, or find good talent in Austin. Like one of the biggest challenges I hear from companies moving from the Bay Area is like they hire great talent, and 6 months later they have to hire new great talent because like that person has been poached. You know, it's very competitive. And so if you're like looking for some stability, I think Austin's a really good place. Yeah, I think those are like two things I would keep in mind moving to Austin.
All right, so the companies are here, they've either moved here or they're already here and you're working with them. One of the things that we've talked about previously on the podcast is the sector diversity in Austin is really powerful. We have all these different types of things. And so now we're talking about kind of the defense sector. How are you seeing those companies that you're working with integrating with the rest of the innovation ecosystem?
So this is a great question. And I'll share a little bit about my background here. I moved to Austin 2015. I was moving here for a job with Capital Factory and Accelerator here. And I knew I wanted to be in this space. I didn't really know how lucky I was going to be to like get dropped at one of the like innovation hubs in Austin. But there is so much happening in Austin, right? And there's so many like innovation organizers in Austin that are supporting all these different ecosystems. And that's even separate aside from the defense space. When I look at the defense space, like people probably don't realize this, but there's Army Futures Command, there's AAL, there's AFWorks, there's the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, there's Navy folks here, there's SpaceWorks folks here, there's a group called NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency here, there's the Texas Military Department. They're like, and I probably even only know half of these people that are here, right? But like all these folks are around for the same exact reason that the AAL is here, right? Like we want to know what's happening in the commercial ecosystem. We want to provide this like front door that people can come knock on and say, hey, I've got an idea that the government should be aware of or talk to. And we want to do business, right? Like we're not gonna say it's gonna be easy to do business with us, but we want to do business with these companies. So like there's a lot of just players here that want to help and want to work, right? And so I think coming back to the cultural piece a little bit, right? Like part of what AAL is doing and telling the Army and AFC is like some of the ways that we support and integrate with these innovation ecosystems are formal ways, right? Like you might have a formal partnership with an innovation ecosystem, but there's all of these informal ways too, right? And that's really where it's less about like talk and just doing, right? So like having AAL and AFC and defense people come to events, right? Like we go to meetups and like we attend hackathons sometimes, and like we take meetings with like VCs to share deal flow and understand who they're seeing, who we're seeing. So really, it's just like talk is cheap, but like doing is what matters here. And so I would say that's one of the biggest ways that we're trying to culturally change how the DoD approaches engaging these innovation ecosystems. Is just like be a participant, be a good steward, a good business partner, right? Like show up to meetings, show up to events, like reach out, see what people are doing, and really just creating that like that network effect of how good companies get filtered to us, right? Like that's how good deal flow happens. It's like somebody tells us, hey, there's this really great company that is solving the problem that you're working on. So that's I think the biggest way that the Army is engaging is just like participating and supporting.
So what about the engagement kind of across the kind of central Texas military structure? So Obviously, there are also bases nearby as well. How do you guys connect with that, or do you, or is it more than just kind of obviously within the Austin metro?
Yeah, absolutely. We engage with some of the bases and as well like with the other DoD partners that are here. Or like physically, geographically, I would say probably the biggest way that we engage with these bases or other military installations is for soldier touch points. So when we're working on a problem, like we have to understand it. And I come from the civilian world, right? Like when people talk about an artillery round and a howitzer cannon, I like sort of know what they're talking about, but they'll actually take me out to to a military installation and like let me watch one of these things fire, and my eardrums are ringing, and now I know what they're talking about when they say like these things have shock and vibration. Cool, okay, I get it now, right? But we do the same thing for the companies that we want to work with too, right? We take them out to these installations, we let them see the problems. Like anybody who's done live demos knows that like everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Yes.
So like we took these companies out to look at this process, and like they were working on the artillery reloading project. But when we take them out to the field, like it's rainy, it's pouring rain, like the wrong ammunition has been shipped, and like the guy's trying to like write a note on this like form with a pen and a paper, and the paper is like falling apart. And so literally one of the companies is like, hey, we came here thinking that we're going to pitch this idea, but actually what you guys need is an inventory management system. Like you need a cell phone with some like computer vision that can quickly scan the shells or the pallets, like put that into an inventory management system and like auto request the right stuff for you. That is like standard operating procedure for any like warehouse or like manufacturing company, right? And this company is like, we can build that for you, right? Like we can like literally like go purchase commercial off the shelf products, like tweak it a little bit, integrate it with your systems, and have something for you in like 6 months, right? And so that was one of those things that like we had no idea that we needed that until we took these companies out there. They saw the problems. They saw the surrounding problems. So when we talk, it's interesting when we talk about like what problems we're solving. Like the problem that we initially came out with was like, how do we load artillery shells faster? But really what we're looking at is like, how do we make this whole operation faster? How do we make this whole process more efficient and effective? So it's kind of really about reframing the problem, less about like physically getting the shell from this spot to that spot, and more about like holistically, how do we make this process faster? Anyways, that's an example of one way that we work with installations. Part of AAL hiring process is like, we want to hire folks from the commercial sector. We want these folks that can double speak. So, right, they can speak Army and they can speak commercial language. I can speak commercial language. I had know nothing about Army. So like when I get hired, they're like, hey, you should go to this event out at this base. You should go like talk with these soldiers. And so really just kind of creating that interface where commercial and military folk can engage. And all that has to happen on, a lot of that happens at the bases.
Great. So I'm going to ask you to take the AAL hat off for a second and put on your Austinite hat.
Okay.
What are the biggest challenges that Austin faces today?
So I think that the biggest challenges that Austin is facing center around growth. Like we've been growing, our economy's been growing, like the workforce has been growing, and certain things can grow naturally at a faster pace than other things, right? And so I look at like transportation, housing costs, salary, and like competitive salary. I think those are some of the biggest things that are challenges, right? Like now I think that the last 2 years has proven that there's a lot of flexibility that organizations can leverage, like working from home or hybrid work schedules that can alleviate some of those, some of that constriction. As an example, like I moved down south recently. I used to live very close to downtown. I would like, I had a mile commute into my office each day. It was great. I moved down south and now it's 30 minutes to get into downtown. But if I only have to do that a couple times a week, like that's a balance of work life that I like, right? And as someone that could go to another city or go to a different place to get a job, like, work-life balance is important to me. So I think if companies within Austin try to make this like 5 day work, like 5 day in the office work schedule, I think the transportation and the housing cost piece restriction is going to be much more important to talent, which then stifles economic growth. So I'd say like, hopefully Austin culture can like be pervasive. I think it's doing a great job so far. Like Austin culture generally understands that work-life balance. I think that's part of what makes Austin special. But I think that we've got to keep that ethos alive. I mean, culture is another thing too, right? Like anytime mass growth happens or an influx of people, like culture changes. I look at like the East Austin areas as a microcosm here. Like East Austin has changed immensely over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been here. And, folks from East Austin that I talk to who've been there for their lives say like, that's been happening for the last, 15 years. So like, I think that culture change can happen at a quick pace. And unless we're like being aware of it, it just kind of happens. Right. And so I think that intentionally corralling culture or like keeping certain aspects of culture alive will help maintain the Austin vibe and the Austin ethos that really is part of what makes this place special. So I hope that part's addressed as well.
Well, Brance, we always close our podcast with the same thing. Brance, what's next, Austin?
Oh man, I'm gonna take a glass half full, purely optimistic approach here, and I hope live events in Austin keep like coming back. Right, like South by Southwest, I think is going to be a great like proof point here. I'm so excited for that. Like South by is one of the best events I've ever been to. Right, I love South by, but even things like I'm starting to see live music again. Like that's partially my level of comfortability, but like, oh man, I was listening to like the live radio shows at Guero's on the radio last night. I was like, man, I need to go back and attend this. This is like such good blues music, and it's right in my backyard, and it's like silly if I'm not here every night, So I hope live music and events like keep coming back, and that people feel comfortable to go attend those things again.
Perfect way to end the podcast. Brance Hudzietz, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with the Army Applications Lab.
Michael, Jason, thanks so much for having me. It was a great time talking. Cheers.
Cheers.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.